This is Agriculture Today. I'm Samantha Bennett with the K-State Radio Network. Ahead of us this Thursday, our first guest being K-State veterinarian Gregg Hanzlicek. He joins us with reminders for our cattle herd as we enter into this fall. And then our second guest is senior economist with the International Grains Program, Guy Allen, and he provides us an update on why he believes we may be entering into a global recession. Also ahead, Agriculture Today listeners are introduced to our program's latest additions, our fall interns. K-State Ag Communication Senior Maleah Walker and Junior Kady Figge share insight into their backgrounds and what they are most excited about with their new roles. We end today's programming with fall lawn care coming from K-State Research and Extension Horticulture Agent Dennis Patton. He discusses the benefits of having a healthy lawn. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We have with us now Dr. Gregg Hanzlicek. He is a veterinarian with the K-State College of Veterinary Medicine, and today he is going to be discussing with us several cattle care tips as we prepare to enter into the fall. But first and foremost, Gregg, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Going into the fall and for the next month or so, really, preconditioning might be one of the things on the minds of some producers. When we think about preconditioning our calves, what are some of the things that producers should really be keeping in mind now?
Well, do they want to precondition? That's number one. Do they have the ability to precondition? And then what are they trying to protect their calves from? And then what products are they going to need to use? And some of those answers, they need to actually go through their local veterinarian to decide those. But those are the main topics about preconditioning.
And when you say products, when it comes to preconditioning, we're really referring in large part to vaccines, right? So what are some of those vaccines that producers might need to be considering this fall?
Well, the main thing is should I use killed or should I use modified live? And a lot of that just has to do with the producer's preference, but it also has to do with we don't want to be using modified live on calves that are on cows that aren't protected. And so, again, they need to have that discussion with their local veterinarian. But that's topic number one. What we're going to have in the vaccine is usually standard. It's going to be our respiratory, our IBR, our BVDs, BRS, and then we throw PI3 in there also. So
really just those standard vaccines that we think of every year, really for the most part. Nothing new that producers should be considering? Nothing
new. Some producers will add the bacterial, the Pasteurella, and the Mannheimia in there, and that's a producer choice. It's not our baseline vaccine, but it can be added in preconditioning also.
Outside of vaccines, deworming might be something that producers consider including as part of their preconditioning process.
Yeah, and deworming is the strategies or the recommendations seems like they're changing every day, but typically it still goes back to as long as they're on pasture, there's no reason to deworm them because that's where they're going to become infected. So that would be more at weaning or post-weaning. But these calves do need to be dewormed, but probably just wait until we get them off pasture before we do that.
A major concern this summer and going into this fall, of course, is the effect that the drought has had on the availability of forage for our cattle. Because of that, a good check on body condition, you believe, is something that producers should really be taking the time to do thoroughly.
Well, we've been all over the state the last few weeks, and if you're in the eastern half of Kansas, except for the very southern part, the grass conditions were pretty good, so cows are in perfect calving condition. So the question is, okay, how do we maintain that calving condition? And at this time of year, it usually comes down to do we need to supplement protein or not? And really the best way to assess that is to look at the manure. And if the manure, it looks like it's starting to become somewhat constipated as a herd, then we need to start adding some protein. If it looks like normal manure from cows on pasture, let's don't spend the money on protein until we have to. So eastern half, it looks to me like we really don't need to be adding protein yet from the herds that we've looked at. Western half of Kansas, central and western, where the drought is, that's a whole different game. They've been supplementing or depopulating for some time.
Absolutely. And some of the supplement considerations producers might be considering, you mentioned protein as one of those. But as we enter into the fall, is there anything else supplementation-wise that producers should keep in mind?
Well, it's always trace minerals and with vitamins. This time of year, as the grasses become dormant, go from green to brown, our vitamin A content or vitamin E content goes way down. And so this is the time of year where we'd start changing our mineral to be more of a calving mineral than a pasture mineral, meaning we need enough vitamin A and vitamin E in the mineral. And typically we're going to say for a normal 1,400-pound cow, we need about 200,000 international units of vitamin A in there per pound.
These are, of course, seasonal reminders that most producers try and keep in mind, but if they put off putting out supplement, what are some of the signs for deficiencies that they really need to be on the lookout for?
Well, the problem is we don't see it until it becomes clinical and when we recognize it's in the newborn calves. And the good thing is these cows will store the vitamin A and the vitamin E in their liver, but within a few months, it's going to be at a level that's going to put the calves at a deficiency. A typical vitamin A or vitamin E or even selenium deficiency is going to be weak or stillborn calves. Either calves that are just, they never take a breath, or maybe they're weak getting up, or maybe they do okay for a day or two and then crash and burn. And that's typically what we see in those herds.
Sure, that is definitely something of utmost importance when it comes to wanting healthy calves come the spring.
Yep, I'd recommend using somebody that understands nutrition and have them help you pick a mineral that's high quality, has the right type of selenium or copper or zinc, and then make sure the cows eat it. A lot of times we have a mineral out there, but they don't consume it, and if they're not eating it, it's not doing them any good. But I'd start now so that we keep that liver supply up in those cows so that they can pass that either through the calf in utero, or like vitamin A, it's going to be through the colostrum. It's not going to be in the uterus.
Absolutely. Any other fall reminders as producers go into this upcoming season?
Well, the other thing probably should remind, and we probably talk about it too much, is make sure you cut out those ear tags as we go into fall, because we know that that's building up huge, especially hornfly resistance. And so not only cut them out, but dispose of them so that the flies aren't exposed to them. Dispose of them in a manner that's appropriate.
Great reminder. Yeah, don't leave them in a field and call it good, because it'll still build that resistance, unfortunately, right?
Yeah, or next to the chute or in an open trash can or something like that. Yeah, they need to be disposed of properly.
Hopefully by this point in the year, producers have already taken these measures and introduced a rotation of other fly control methods.
Yep, a lot of them won't because they can't get them in off the pasture, and they're going to wait until they preg check or whatever. But a lot of times we see tags carried over all year long, and then they're reintroduced in the spring. And we know that's contributing to resistance in these flies.
Gregg, if producers are looking for more information on maintaining cattle health as we go into the fall, what are some resources for them to look into?
Well, you can go to our website, ksvdl.org, or you can call our telephone number. Main line is 866-512-5650.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time today. We really do appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Once again, that was K-State veterinarian Dr. Gregg Hanzlicek with insight into cattle health going into this upcoming fall. Before we cut to a short break, we are joined now by Guy Allen. He is a senior economist at the International Grains Program here at K-State. And Guy, we're just going to hit a few hot button topics when it comes to the global scale of the world's current economy. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Samantha.
We've talked about this on the program before, but the strength of the U.S. dollar is still extremely high, and we're seeing repercussions of this. Is that correct?
Look, we've seen the U.S. dollar index again this week and last week hit new 20-year highs, and that's just really weighing on U.S. commodity demand and prices. I know a lot of growers I speak to and domestically, given the tight supply situation, not only in the U.S. but internationally, they're scratching their heads a bit. Why haven't we seen commodity prices move higher? But when you look at it from the point of view of our international customers, given these historically high exchange rates, it is historically very, very expensive to them. As that U.S. dollar index rallied over 110 points just this week and last.
You mentioned to me that this is the highest been since 2002. What's the significance of that?
Well, look, that's the exchange rate. You sort of look at that index at 110. So, look, it's making everything that the U.S. export look very, very expensive. The flip side of that, from a consumer point of view, it's making our imports look very, very cheap. But just to drill a little bit down in that index, the big driver of the index are the euro and the Japanese yen. So those continue to devalue significantly against the U.S. dollar. And other countries, our major commodity buyers, are actually seeing a larger decrease in their relative value of their currency. So it's even worse for most of our importers of U.S. grain and livestock products. And why we're seeing that, domestically, we're technically in a recession here in the U.S. And I'd suggest, if we're not already, and I would suggest we are, we're actually entering into a global recession. We're seeing U.S. interest rates starting to rally, and we're seeing conversations come out of the Federal Reserve that they're going to continue to raise those interest rates probably over a longer period than anticipated, and interest rates are going to stay high for a longer period than anticipated in order to get ahead of that inflation.
And you talked about a global recession. The idea of that sounds terrifying in and of itself. And a contributor to that is the highs of current energy prices.
Yeah, look, we've seen natural gas and coal at highs, and they've come off those recently. But a key thing just this week, coal has set new record highs. Historically, say over the last 20 years, we've seen coal trade between $50 a metric ton to $150 a metric ton. Now, one of the key indicators on global coal prices is the price of coal FOB Newcastle, Australia, which is the largest coal exporting port in the world. It's rallied over $450 a metric ton, which, we've never seen coal prices that high. That coal coming out of Australia is moving into their biggest buyers, China, also Japan and Korea. And I'd suggest the U.S. policies for fossil fuels has added to that strength in that fossil fuel market, as the U.S. being a big user and also a significant exporter of energy continues to frustrate the supply of those base load fossil fuels which are required.
Absolutely. Guy, as always, we thank you so much for this economic update on a global scale, and thank you for your insight.
No worries. We've got that USDA WASDE report next week on the 12th, I believe it is. So I look forward to talking to you again after that report comes out.
Absolutely. We'll be back with more ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We are back for a very special segment for our Ag Today listeners. I'm introducing two new voices to the programming. This fall, we've been lucky enough to add two interns onto our Ag Today team. So today I have with us Maleah Walker and Kady Figge, our new interns for this fall. So Maleah, let's go ahead and start with introducing you. Thank you for being an intern, and thanks for joining us for today's segment.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's give some background on you. So you're going to be a familiar voice on Ag Today, so I feel like listeners will be interested to know a little bit about you guys as we go along this semester. But you grew up in Texas, is that right?
Yeah, so I actually grew up in Seymour, Texas, which is right south of the Red River. I like to tell people I'm sandwiched between the Wagner Ranch and the 4 Sixes because that's what everybody recognizes when you talk about Texas. So
Absolutely. And you moved to Kansas when you were in high school?
Yeah, so it was actually my senior year of high school I moved to Kansas, but it's what brought me to K-State, so I really can't complain.
A big move in an important year of your life, and like you said, it brought you here to K-State, which is great. But you grew up with a connection to agriculture, so tell us a little bit about that.
So I come mostly from the commercial cattle side of agriculture. I grew up with Black Angus. My family on my mom's side is strict about black everything. So everything was Angus, Morgan horses, even the chickens were black. The cats were black too. Yeah, Black Diamond, Angus Ranch. That's my connection to Kansas, actually. My mom grew up in Kansas.
Awesome. That makes aesthetically it very pleasing, I'm sure, going around your family's farm. That's really cool. And then when you came to K-State, obviously that ag connection was something that was important to you. But why did you choose ag communications?
Yeah, so it's funny you say that the ag connection was important. It wasn't.
Really?
Honestly. Yeah. So when I came to college, I actually tried to get out of agriculture. I came to K-State for architecture, but it was one semester of that, and I was like, you know what? This was my first time outside of the agricultural community, and I want to go back. I didn't love what I was doing. I didn't see myself in that career. And so I found agricultural communications and journalism, and I didn't even know what it was before my sophomore year of college. but I declared that my major my sophomore year, and then I have loved it ever since. It's absolutely where I belong.
So you've had a lot of opportunities through the last several years of college. You said you started as an ag comm student. Your sophomore year, you're a senior now, like we mentioned. And you applied for this internship this past summer before the school year started. So why this internship? Why Ag Today?
The radio has always intrigued me, and I recorded some spots through 4-H. I was a very involved 4-H'er, and I love public speaking, and I love communicating about agriculture, so it just seemed like the perfect fit.
Awesome. And then you've been interning with us for a few weeks now. You've really only gotten your toes wet at this point in terms of what this internship will include. But so far, what have you enjoyed about it?
I think it's been such a rewarding experience, even just in these 2 weeks. But I've got to say my favorite part of it would be just learning more about agriculture. I don't think I ever would have pursued these topics myself to educate myself, but when they're put in front of me like this, I feel like I'm learning the ins and outs of all these different areas of agriculture. I feel like it's really rounding out my comprehension of ag across the board.
That's awesome. That's one of my favorite parts about this job, too, is I am learning something new every single day, which is always great. And like we mentioned, you've only been on the job for 2 weeks now, but what are you looking forward to the most as the internship goes on?
Yeah, so I think the most exciting thing would be pioneering a story from start to finish, from conception of the idea to the interview, and then just seeing that story play out from start to finish.
It's a rewarding process for sure, and one that I'm excited for you guys to really get to experience. For those tuning in, if they want to know a little bit about you ag-wise, what has been your favorite ag experience in your life so far?
I guess it's not a specific experience, but I would have to say my favorite ag memory would be, checking cattle with both my dad and my grandpa. Checking cattle wasn't always the most fun thing to do, but it always involved dill pickle sunflower seeds. So that's what would get me pumped up to go check some cattle and get the gate.
That's great. So the way to Maleah's heart is dill pickle sunflower seeds. Noted.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Maleah, we are so excited to have you this semester, and we're looking forward to hearing your voice more across Ag Today. I know listeners will be as well. So we're so excited to have you, and thank you for being one of our interns. So now we have with us Kady Figge. She is our second intern that we are going to be speaking with today, rounding out our fall interns. And Kady, I'm so glad to have you on the team with Agriculture Today this fall. You are a junior studying agricultural communications and journalism, but your list of accolades doesn't end there. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I obviously have the major in agricultural communications and journalism, and then I have the secondary major in global food systems leadership studies, and I have a minor in both animal sciences and agricultural sales.
So tell us a little bit about your background. I know you grew up nearby to K-State, so K-State wasn't a hard decision for you.
Yeah, so I grew up in a town called Onega. It's about 45 minutes from here, very rural community, and I absolutely loved it. K-State was my second home. Both of my parents and my sister graduated from K-State, and every time I stepped on the campus for a 4-H event or an FFA event, it just felt like home to me. So growing up nearby, it was super easily accessible, and I just loved the opportunity to go back and help on my family's farm. We have a production registered Angus farm of about 200 registered Angus cattle, and then about 50 commercial cattle as well. We dabble in some crops, but that was my production side of background.
Absolutely. So you mentioned that strong show cattle background, but also you were very involved in FFA. So it's natural to think that you wanted to be involved in agriculture when you came to K-State. But why did you choose AgCom specifically?
Growing up, I was showing with a lot of people, getting to know what those people's careers were and kind of looking up to a lot of people as mentors. So throughout showing and the 4-H world, I got to know some people that worked at the Kansas Department of Agriculture, and they worked in the communications department, and that was kind of my first in, was getting to take a tour there, and then I did a couple of job shadows there and a couple of different opportunities through FFA, and I just kind of really fell in love with the communications department at the Kansas Department of Agriculture, and then I realized that there's so much more that you can do, and I just, as it went on and the more things I learned, the more things that I fell in love with.
And you're very involved. Obviously, you were involved as a young child in high school, and you're involved even now as a college student. So why did you decide, I want to apply to be an Ag Today intern? What made it so appealing to add on top of your busy schedule?
Yeah, obviously I love being involved in everything agriculture on campus and off, but one thing that really drew me to agriculture today was the aspect of broadcast. I love getting to do those unique experiences within agricultural communications, and I also get to learn a lot of different unique opportunities and experiences while working here. I'm learning different things every day being in that chair.
Absolutely. Yeah, I told Maleah as well that that's one of my favorite things about this job is I'm constantly learning something new every day. So that is definitely an added benefit. And you've only been with Ag Today for about a week and a half now. But so far, what has been your favorite part about being an Ag Today intern?
I think my favorite thing is just getting to learn all the new things. Like, the technology is super cool, super interesting to me, but all of the super interesting things you get to learn while listening to other people talk is so intriguing. What they know and what I can absorb from them is just another thing that I can add on to my personal knowledge.
And as we look forward to the rest of your internship with us here, what do you think you're looking forward to most?
I love connecting with people. As a communications person, I think it's super interesting to get to hear somebody else's story and kind of get to play around with that story while editing it or getting it published out to the news. So I want to be able to listen to other people and really connect with them on a deeper level rather than just sitting in the background and having them talk to me, being super personal with them.
I know that our Ag Today listeners are going to be looking forward to hearing your voice and Maleah's voice more across the air as our internship goes on this fall with you both. But for listeners to get to know a little bit more about you, a little bit something unique probably about you, what is your favorite agriculture memory that you have so far?
Yeah, my favorite agriculture experience or memory would be just being on the farm with my grandpa and my dad. They were two of my biggest mentors, and they still are to this day. They worked their butt off, and I strive to be like them every day. So whether that was sitting on a four-wheeler, going to check calves, or tagging calves and running them through our chutes.
Obviously, for our listeners, both of our interns this fall, they have strong ag backgrounds, but specifically in animal sciences, which is always fun. So I know that you guys will probably be leaning towards a lot of those stories this fall, which is great. But I know listeners are going to be looking forward to hearing from you both, and we're so excited to have you guys. So thank you for being interns.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Once again, that was K-State senior Maleah Walker and junior Kady Figge. They are both serving as our new Agriculture Today interns for this fall. We are so excited to have them and look forward to having their voices more across the air, contributing towards telling the incredible stories of K-State research and extension and all of the growth and experience they hopefully will gain from this experience. Still ahead of us today on Agriculture Today, we end this Thursday's programming with the last of the three-part series from K-State horticulture agent out of Johnson County, Dennis Patton. He ends this series on fall lawn care in his final segment, sharing information on fertilizer application specifically, as well as the benefits of actually having a healthy lawn. With that being said, we will now be cutting to a short break, but we will be back with more ahead on Agriculture Today.
This is Agriculture Today. Along with Samantha Bennett, I'm Jeff Wickman. In this week's horticulture segment, we conclude our series on fall care for cool season lawns. In the previous 2 weeks, K-State Research and Extension Horticulture Agent for Johnson County, Dennis Patton, has covered the importance of choosing quality seed and the process for planting or overseeding cool season lawns. This week, Dennis focuses on fertilizing as well as the benefits of a thick, healthy lawn.
The one thing we didn't mention in this overseeding step is you do want to fertilize, usually with a starter fertilizer to push it. But, the goal is not to have to seed your lawn or overseed. And so September is the most important time to fertilize the cool season lawns. Here again, the tall fescue bluegrass, not the zoysia, not the Bermuda. They're shutting down for the season. But yeah, getting that application of high nitrogen fertilizer on here early September is the best way to help that lawn recover from the hot, dry summer we just had. But here again, if you're going to fertilize, you got to make sure you're watering it in. So we just don't want to put it on a really drought-stressed lawn. We want to make sure it's growing actively.
Do we need to do a soil test first or not?
Ideally, if you had a soil test, it could help tell you for sure exactly what analysis of fertilizer you need to have applied. K-State Extension does that. Usually the turnaround time's a couple weeks. When in doubt, without a soil test, I'd tell you to put on the high nitrogen, like a 30, 0, 0, that first number closer to 30. The next two as close to 0 as possible. And just go ahead and do that and still get your soil test, and you'll know for sure, and for future applications, whether you need phosphorus, potassium, or just the straight nitrogen fertilizer.
And will this be quick release at this point?
In September, it can be either quick release or a combination of quick, slow release. And keep in mind, on the homeowner market, only about probably a third of that fertilizer is going to be slow release. But the nice thing about slow release in September is that it kind of spoon feeds the lawn for several weeks instead of getting a big flush at once. So, yes, slow would be preferred, but, any fertilization is going to be beneficial to the lawn to help it recover from summer.
We had talked about this earlier, the fact that you might need to do some preparation. How would we determine whether or not a lawn would benefit from power raking or core aeration? And I guess, again, talking with tall fescue and Kentucky bluegrass.
So there's a couple of mechanical practices. So we've talked about verticutting. It's really only used if you're going to be overseeding your lawn. And a lot of people kind of throw power raking and verticutting together in this day and age of doing the same thing. So those practices are done for seeding. The other practice you mentioned is core aeration, and this is a pass that pulls plugs about the size of your finger out of the lawn every 3 inches or so. And that's really done to help break up thatch, to relieve soil compaction, get nutrients moving down in the soil. That's probably best done if you're just doing yearly maintenance. It's not the ideal practice for overseeding. It doesn't give quite a uniform stand. Or both could be done before seeding the lawn. But if your goal is seeding, verticut, power rake. If your goal is just more management, then core aerate the lawn, and that can be done September through early October. Where lawn seeding probably needs to be done September through the end of the month.
One good benefit from having a nice thicker lawn is the fact that you're going to have less weeds to contend with.
Correct. The definition of the all-American lawn is really changing and fairly rapidly, with the movement of less pesticides, to pollinator habitat, those type of things. So, no, not everyone needs, air quote, golf course quality lawn, but there certainly is an advantage to having some good cover, as you mentioned, less weeds. The other thing is it cuts down on soil erosion, which soil erosion affects our water quality. That soil ends up in our lakes and streams and ponds. And so, yes, there is some advantage to keeping some sort of good cover on the soil itself, because if not, there's disadvantages. Also, where are you going to play with your dogs and your kids, too? You still got to have some sort of lawn and good covering to keep them out of the mud.
Well, and as we mentioned earlier, September is really the month to really focus on the lawn. And I would imagine that Extension has a number of publications.
Yes, we've got great lawn care publications, from fertilizer to seeding to overseeding to the core aeration to even weed control, those type of things that can help you out. Just get on the K-State website or contact your local office and they can help direct you.
That's K-State Research and Extension Horticulture Agent for Johnson County, Dennis Patton, with tips for maintaining and improving cool season lawns this fall. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Samantha Bennett, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.